Welcome back to the Content That Grows podcast. I'm your host, Nate Turner. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Kamil Rextin. We are going to be talking about demand generation versus brand awareness. So a little bit about Kamil. He spent a decade plus at various companies like Breather, Uberflip, and CrowdRiff doing growth and RevOps. Since starting 42 Agency, he's built a team that has worked with companies like Profitwell, Charma, Sin, HubDoc, and dozens of others, including to generate 7 figures in pipeline, scale customer acquisition, and build robust GTM systems. Kamil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a solid bio. I almost had a hard time getting through it. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So I once held the title of VP of Demand Generation, and obviously, talk a bit with clients now at 10 Speed about demand generation and brand awareness and all that stuff. So excited to chat about today. Would love, before we get started, just paint a little more detail, give a little context on, the type of work you do for your SaaS clients and kind of your frame of reference of where you're coming from today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we call it a demand gen and RevOps shop. So I just like to describe it as a front end of the house and the back end of the house. Mm-hmm. Front of the house is all customer acquisition, leads, SQLs, running paid media, paid social, direct mail, all that fun stuff. And then the back end of the house is what happens on the system side and the measurement side. So making sure that the leads are getting routed to the right person, you're measuring the right outcomes, you're attributing the right sources, how your Salesforce is set up, how your HubSpot is set up, and all the back end stuff that goes into it. So we kind of work across both. So we make sure that you're reaching the right people, you're getting the right results, and then on the back end, it's tracking all the way down to revenue or pipeline or whatever that metric is.
Cool. Awesome. So in your world, and kind of what you're doing day in and day out, I guess to start, in this topic, like what are some of the biggest differences that you see between demand generation and brand awareness?
So I think there's this conversation happening right now where a lot of people are equating demand generation to brand awareness. So when I ask people, what is demand generation? And they're like, well, you educate your prospects on your product and you make sure that they're aware of you. I'm like, well, that kind of sounds like you're talking about brand awareness, because brand awareness is making sure people know you exist. And they're like, no, that demand generation is like, and I came up in a different world. So I remember like my first job, somebody asked me to they're like, hey, can you do some demand gen for us? This is like early stage company, like 15 years ago. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is, but sounds interesting. I'll do it. So,
yeah.
And in that world, it was like demand gen was you're selling to mid-market enterprise. You have a higher ACV product, so you need to generate leads for the sales team to close. And demand gen's job was to get those leads into the funnel, make sure you work with sales to make sure they're qualified. And sort of we used to have these weekly meetups when like sales, BDR team, AE team, marketing team would meet. And the demand gen person was sort of the, appear to the sales team on the marketing side. So they were like kind of making sure that the leads are not getting disqualified. Hey, how are the leads this week? Did you have any interesting conversations? So to me, like we lost the meaning of what demand gen is in this new world of like where demand gen is brand awareness. Because to me, demand gen is just simply generating qualified demand for the sales team to then close. And that is leads.
Yeah.
A lot of people are afraid to say leads now. They're like, oh, leads is a dirty word. I'm like, no, leads are just people who are interested in what you're selling. Like, there's nothing bad about that inherently. So that's sort of where I come from on that debate.
Yeah, got it. And is that, when you're working with clients, do you typically get people coming in that are already aligned with your way of thinking, or is that part of why they're coming to you as sort of the education and
a blend of both? Yeah. I don't think a lot of clients outside of B2B marketing people don't care. Like they're like a founder or an executive, like I just want to generate pipeline. Like I don't care if you call it demand generation or brand awareness.
Yeah.
And we kind of like our approach is to, and we don't use that terminology like with our customers or internally. We talk about like in market, out of market, bottom of the funnel, top of funnel, rather than like debating about the semantics. But I feel like the semantics are important because all this conversation is leading to a place where people who are new to marketing, they'll come to me and they're like, oh, what do you think about this demand gen? I'm like, that's not demand gen. Like, just focus on the fundamentals. Don't get caught up in this demand creation versus capture versus, I don't know, whatever. Just like focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think it's a fair point you made earlier that like I think you called it like we lost our way, lost the definition, because it was 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, like there was a playbook, and it was your webinars and you had your ebooks and you had the downloads and you were scoring the ebook downloads and I think that's where like the whole like I hear a lot, people kind of bad mouthing MQLs the same way you mentioned leads, and it's like none of that is wrong. What was wrong was treating every person who downloaded an ebook as
I've done that.
a lead or an MQL, same, and putting every single one of them into an SDR or BDR's hands.
They just call them and they're
like confusing intent, and then and then like or celebrating MQLs. And then saying, well, the rest is sales problem. Like we do MQL.
100%.
If you don't have that disconnect on like the relationship between the marketing and sales and like you have a realistic expectation about what intent is, then by all means, please, and you should track leads, track MQLs, like understand those things, and treat them appropriately. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think that there's a lot there, and that probably that plus the new fad definition of creation versus capture probably leading to a lot of confusion as well, and kind of pushing folks into that.
Like at the end of the day, marketers are like, we don't get a seat at the table. And I'm like, well, you keep debating about these pointless things. That's why you don't get a seat. Like, just focus on the business outcomes. How do you create value for the company? That's at the end of the day, all that matters. You call it an MQL, you call it an SQL. Your CEO doesn't care. They just want to see and a lot of times, and I have we did the whole ebook to SDR stuff when I was years ago, and it worked at that point. And there was a reason it was a new thing, and naturally it ran out of gas and then it stopped working. And I don't think you should do that anymore. But there was a value in that at that point of time. But throwing out the baby with the bathwater, the idea of leads are bad, with that whole I think that's just too extreme.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I actually when we tested it at Sprout, it didn't really work very well. But I mean, it was also a lower price point product with a free trial, so you don't really need that motion as much. But yeah, I mean, I think there's the other thing I would add from what you were saying before is if you're a marketer that can consistently generate pipeline, you absolutely will have a seat at the table.
Yes.
And I think that's, one of the biggest differentiators there. But so, kind of coming back to this, what are you mentioned in market, out of market, bottom of funnel, some of that stuff. So do you, I guess what's working, or what are you doing? Is it a lot of ABM type stuff, or what are you doing that you consider the demand generation of 2024 and beyond?
A lot of it is, I don't want to say centered around research, but understanding who your customer is. We work with a lot of companies, and it's just about going through your closed loss data, understanding why you're losing deals, what are your competitors saying, tying that into campaigns, offers, AdWords, paid social, whatever have you. I think you have to start with let's get a lay of the land and align on who our customer is and what's a good fit need for us. And even a lot of people will come to us and hey, we want to generate SQLs. I'm like, how do you define an SQL? Can we align on the definition of is it a meeting booked? Is it an opportunity open? Is it lead us? And everybody has a different definition of what an SQL is. Yeah. So I think it starts with that. And once you align on that, then you can build the mechanics of the ad platforms and the email campaigns and all that stuff to align around that definition of what our outcome is. very tactically, if like we were working with a customer of ours and they were calling everything that was coming in SQL, despite the fact they had a meeting booked or not. And because we were set up the ad platforms to track against offline conversions, we're just getting garbage conversions because the data coming in was just bad data.
Yeah.
And the ad platforms don't know what a good SQL is. You kind of have to define it. The systems don't know what. So when you look at the reporting, you're like, oh, we got so many SQLs, but why are they not turning into pipeline if we're getting so many SQLs? And that's where you start digging into like, well, how do we define an SQL? Like, we should probably have a better definition of SQL. I think that's like, there's no, like, I like to tell people there's no like magical channel. There's not been an innovation in like marketing channels in the last 10 years since Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. I think it's all like, and it's getting harder and harder. So that's why, like, I think it's more important to base it on like really good research definition of ICP, how you define the pipeline, instrumentation of the pipeline, instrumentation of the micro funnel, and then sort of building up on top of that.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. It makes sense hearing you describe that, why you guys pair demand gen and RevOps together, because there's a lot of that foundational work to even start off on the right foot and not just be doomed from the start.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of this stuff that we're talking about? Like, do you see it play out differently for early stage companies versus like a growth stage company? Or
I think for early stage companies, it's primarily, we would put like maybe 90% of media spend on strict bottom of the funnel stuff.
Yeah.
Because you just wanna make sure you get revenue through the door. You don't have the luxury of building a brand, because by the time you build a brand, you might be out of business. So like, you kind of like, I need to pay the bills.
For sure.
I think later stage companies, we have more luxury of doing top of funnel stuff, because we can wait for that top of funnel awareness to translate into bottom of the funnel intent in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months.
Yep.
So we do a little bit more like 30, 60, like, there's like this marketing thing. I think it's by the research institute. I forgot their name, but like 95% of your market is out of market, 5% is in market. Mm-hmm. So with the more growth later stage companies, we can focus on that out of market and like build that awareness and build that brand affinity more, because we can afford to. Frankly, we have the runway. Yeah. But with earlier stage companies, it's all about that 5%. And like, you have to focus. And like in some markets, like project management software, for example, or CRM, that 5% is large enough for a small, like an early stage company to build like a $500 million business out of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it sounds like there's pretty decent alignment on kind of how we think about things. So one, like, I've definitely had a number of prospect calls in the years, like companies are so early that they're, not even spending on paid in an established market, where there's like, who your buyer is, like you have product market fit, but like that's kind of been my advice typically there is like, please go spend your money there first, then then come to us and let's start thinking about SEO and content marketing and like diversifying your channels and some of that stuff. But like, go for
put some wins on the board.
Yeah, exactly. Put wins on the board, get the stuff that's high intent now. And then the second piece is like, with earlier stage companies, I think we tend to really start close to the product and like the core pain points. And, that's, if you're going to be going from 0 to 1 on a content program, like that's where to start, is like very, very close to the product, a lot of bottom of funnel. And then, start to diversify as it builds up and goes from there. So, makes sense. I think there's a lot of parallels that I see there. But when, so you mentioned the RevOps side of things, and like maybe not even defining an SQL. Let's talk about like the measurement side of things, and we can go, far and wide as you want to go on the topic of marketing measurement as well. But like, what are some of the critical steps, I guess, that you're seeing to be able to show like accurate view of progress and performance?
So my view of this has changed over the years. So, and it's evolving. So, but I think for 90% of B2B businesses that are spending primarily on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Google. Like you don't have a diverse media mix. You just need first touch, last touch. That does the job. You just need to know how people found, like, what was the first thing they found about you and which channel they convert from. 90% of the time, it's not even that different. So like, you don't need sophisticated media measurement models because 80% of your budget is going into one channel. So like, who are we kidding? I think I used to be the guy who was a big fan of like W-shaped models and U-shaped models, and I have a lot of respect for Dream Data and Hockey Stack, the two companies that kind of are in the space right now. But I feel like that comes later. Also, I've been in places where we implemented Visible twice, and then nobody looked at the dashboard. Like we were like, oh, the W-shaped model says this. What do we do with that? Okay, fantastic. Looks pretty, but what do I do with that information? I have no idea.
Yeah.
So I think you can take it to the extreme and analyze it. What we have been sort of exploring on our side for the past 2 years is more marketing mix modeling, in the sense that tying back if we're doing offline campaigns and other campaigns to a more holistic probabilistic model.
Yeah.
Or frankly, with a couple of customers, we just turn off a channel, see what happens. If we turn off Facebook, if it does drive meaningful impact, then we'd see that impact in whatever the average sales cycle is. If it doesn't, then you probably won't see it.
Yep.
And sometimes there's a meaningful impact because it might not be, part of it is directly attributable to a first touch, last touch. Part of it is it just creates that halo effect around the brand and it drives a lot of direct traffic and organic as well. But I used to be the guy who was sophisticated, multi-touch, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm just keep it simple. You kind of already know, you're putting money into Google, that's driving the business. Just just do what makes you money and not overcomplicating it too much.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have told many, many, many people, we, grew Sprout to 100 million in revenue and IPO, half the time just on last touch. And then about the second half, we had first touch and last touch. And I would say if you were to ask me one of my top things that I felt I wasted time on in my 8.5 years there, would be the 9 to 10 months that we evaluated vendors, tried to figure out multi-touch attribution, all that stuff, only to kind of come back around and be I think that first touch and last touch is fine and gets us there. And I actually don't know. They may have multi-touch at this point, but
and they probably have more
be well, instead of trying to figure out did this event add $890 in MRR or 8,000 MRR? Why don't we just say, we agree that we should be at these events?
Yes.
We're having good conversations.
If the customers are there,
it's doing good stuff. Let's all agree it is contributing to revenue.
Yeah.
We should give credit where credit's due, but we don't need that exact number to come out in some sort of W-shaped model or something like you're saying. So
it's a point of diminishing return. You overanalyze, you realize, well, I spent more money and time analyzing that $1 in return versus I could have done that somewhere else.
Totally. And I think the other thing is you mentioned something about, marketers being well, look at the W-shaped model and kind of getting sucked into that. That almost, can be your new look at all the MQLs we generated. I think it's important.
Yes, 100%.
That you're keeping a really close tab on sales ops, rev ops, and if they agree with what you're showing, and also with your CFO. There's some hard realities on the numbers and closed deals and profit and all that stuff. That's don't just say because the model said it's good that it's good.
I feel a lot of marketing people and maybe salespeople, but I'm a marketer, but they use W-shaped models and XYZ to sort of justify what they're doing. It's I'm spending money on a podcast. Oh, the W-shaped model shows, 10% of opportunities by a podcast. If you know it's working, you know it's working.
Right. Yep.
So same with there's this, how did you hear about us? I think it's
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, so how am I going to know how I heard about you guys in the first place? There's like so many biases that get introduced to it, and I feel like it's used to justify your own bias.
Yeah.
Like it's used to justify, oh, I'm going to do a podcast. I want to justify the existence of this podcast. So two people said they heard about us on a podcast. Fantastic. But is that a meaningful amount of people in the grand scheme of scalable stuff? No,
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah. And I mean, the flip side is like you can also work against yourself very easily in that situation too, because you can have that, and sure, maybe for the first few months it shows that, but when it stops, and then you're being asked by CEO, CFO to prove it with that data that you have, and you're like, well, but I know it's doing more than just what's in this attribution. And then it's kind of
That's
working
very
against you. But the thing, so I'm a fan of it, but in the exact context that you're talking about, which is one, don't have pre-baked options in a drop down, because that's guaranteed to just be they'll pick the top one or whatever. Like it's not helpful.
Yeah.
And two, it just has to be like added context and not like you said, like treated as the end all be all, because you know we have that on our form, and it's cool. I mean, sometimes people are like, you know, my boss forwarded me episode
right
of your podcast, and it's exactly what we're dealing with or whatever, and you're like, cool, that's good context, or a link to like your LinkedIn post specifically that they read and they want to talk about, like that's great stuff. But like to try to quantify it all and like you know,
and I feel like it's
like
it works for agencies like ours because we also have higher deal sizes, slower sales cycles. We don't get hundreds of leads a month. We get like, so we have more time to dig into the specifics of that. But if I'm Sprout and I have a SMB plus enterprise business that is $500 million in revenue, I'm not going to sit there and analyze all this data. Like it's just
right. You're gonna lose the nuance. You're gonna roll it up into a pivot table, and then it starts to be treated more as a real data source.
Yes.
Than it should be. So yeah. Well, we seem to have some aligned views on a few of these things so far. So I'll ask you about this as well. Do you have clients, or do you typically recommend, or do you have stuff that goes directly to SDRs? Do you use like a Chili Piper type of tool? And
we use Revenue Hero. They're a Chili Piper competitor. I'm a small investor, so I'm incredibly biased towards them. We do. I think one of my other controversial opinions is that today marketers are just too focused on the bottom of the funnel. I think you should be. I think you should drive bottom of the funnel. But it's also kind of like handing out coupons inside a pizza shop. Like people are we even driving, like, I don't know how to say this properly, but they're already in market. They're already aware. They're already probably going to come buy from you. So like marketers, I think we should also not forget about the top and the middle, especially the middle.
Yeah.
Like in a lot of conversations, we're either talking about the top of the funnel, which is awareness, or bottom, which is like conversion, but we're kind of forgetting that fat middle, which is people are problem aware, maybe solution aware, and they're kind of like, I don't know if I should, I think we're over indexing on the bottom of the funnel, demo requests, sign up, but not like the middle where they're like kind of unsure and like, how do we drive them? I don't have any good answers for how you drive them towards like to pick you as a vendor.
Yeah.
We tried a bunch of stuff. We do some quizzes for some of our customers. We do some interactive stuff, but that was, my spiel in the middle.
Yeah. No, I agree. Which I would say we actually do a ton in the middle of funnel on the content side, which tends to be in many cases driving even more conversions than bottom of funnel stuff. And you can, again, like SQLs and everything else, you can get to semantics of what you call middle or bottom of funnel. But yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, it feels like there's a lot of focus on, you mentioned handing out coupons inside the pizza shop. And then I think there's like right up to the top, a lot of people want to have or start a podcast and, different things there that is great. And that is marketing. It is brand awareness. It's, it's doing those things
Yeah.
very high in the funnel, making people aware of you, building your audience. But there is a lot, yeah, like you said, in the middle that folks are in market
That gets
they're
ignored.
considering,
Yeah.
and yeah, they're doing that. Yeah. Cool. Anything else you wanted to add? I think we kind of went quickly into the demand generation side. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about on the brand awareness side of the versus
No, I
conversation?
think my one spiel is that we often treat performance and brand as two separate things, but I think we should also brand is just performance measured over a longer period of time. So if performance is measured over months, brand is measured over years, but a lot of people like treat brand as it can't be measured, like don't try to measure it, but like I think it should be. It's just a longer time frame. Like that's my only.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, true on both paid and non-paid
Yeah.
sides for
100%.
sure. Yeah. Cool. I think I'm out of questions because if, we start something else, we'll probably like
No,
a 2
it's
hour
all good.
episode. So, I think I really enjoyed the conversation. I felt like we hit on a lot of good points. And, especially relevant to a lot of folks, I'm sure, in both early and growth stage companies. I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways or just things that I would like to emphasize, because it maybe wasn't talked about as much, is just the deep importance of that RevOps side and having good data and good definitions. And,
Yeah.
I think I understand it because I've been there. Like you got numbers to hit this month and this quarter, and there, the clock's always resetting, and you need to keep hitting your goals, and there's pressure there, but like, it's just not worth skipping past that fundamental part to make sure you have the right inputs and definitions of things to build on, because otherwise your tech debt just gets bigger. So
Yeah.
I think that's
It gets worse with time. Yeah.
perfect.
100% agree.
Yeah, glad that you called that part out. So cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us
pleasure.
today. This was a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If you want to check out any other episodes, visit 10speed.io/podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.